Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Tuesday, December the 14th, 2021. I thought I'd start today by talking about the truth, because as we are discovering, perhaps the most dangerous thing that one can do today is to speak the truth. Now, in my country, Canada, truth is not particularly relevant. It is not a defense to an accusation of hate speech. And this comes from Supreme Court verdict, Canada Human Rights Commission versus Taylor, 1990. And my old boss, Doug Christie, was one of the lawyers. Well, he was the chief lawyer in this case. And it's absolutely an incredible verdict. Let's see, most especially does not contain an exemption for truthful statements. And the court ruled that Section 13.1 of the Charter provides no defense to the discriminatory practice it describes. But the fact that truth is not a defense does not give Section 13.1 a fatally broad scope. A restriction upon freedom of expression in the context of Section 13.1 is not excessive, where it operates to suppress statements which are either truthful or intended to be truthful, as it is not necessary that truthful statements be used for such ends, whatever that might mean. The effects of Section 13.1 upon freedom of expression are not so deleterious as to make intolerable its existence in a free and democratic society. Ho, ho. The section furthers a government objective of great significance and impinges upon expression exhibiting only tenuous links with the values underlying the freedom of expression guarantee. Yes, freedom of expression, definitely guaranteed in Canada as long as it's the right type of expression. Hate propaganda contributes little to the aspirations of Canadians or Canada in the quest for truth, the promotion of individual self-development, or the protection and fostering of a vibrant democracy. Yes, it actually says that, where the participation of all individuals is accepted and encouraged. Yeah, how about that? Section 13, I'm reading from Wikipedia here. Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act was a provision of the Canadian Human Rights Act dealing with hate messages. The provision prohibited online communications which were likely to expose a person or persons to hatred or contempt on the basis of a prohibited ground of discrimination, such as race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, etc. Of course, this does not apply to white people. Very controversial it was, and was eventually struck down. Let's see, Alan Borovoy, General Counsel for the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, noted that under Section 13.1, intent is not a requirement, and truth and reasonable belief in the truth is no defense. He has said that when he and other human rights activists advocated the creation of human rights commissions, they never imagined that they might ultimately be used against freedom of speech. Mary Agnes Welch, president of the Canadian Association of Journalists, stated that human rights commissions were never meant to act as language nannies. The current system allows complainants to chill the speech of those they disagree with by entangling targets in a human rights bureaucracy that doesn't have to operate under the same strict rules of defense as a court. Linguist and analytical philosopher Noah Chomsky said about the section, "I think it's outrageous, like the comparable European laws. It's also pure hypocrisy. If it were applied, the media and journals would be shut down. They don't expose current enemies of the state to hatred or contempt." The Taylor case was about a man named John Ross Taylor who had a phone line. You could call up this phone line and you would hear messages. And I saw the transcript of the messages from the court case. It was pretty anodyne stuff. Essentially, it was about the Bolshevik Revolution and did you know how many Jews were top Bolsheviks? That was pretty much it. And because of this, truth is no longer a defense to accusations of hate speech. Now, it is widely rumored that the government of Justin Trudeau is going to resurrect Section 13(1). So if you ever hear a Canadian talk about the rights, equality rights, that Canada is a land of equality and that it guarantees freedom of speech, you should laugh in their faces. Here's a story from Chris Menahan of Information Liberation. Twitter, under newly appointed CEO Parag Agrawal, has expanded its list of factually true statements they'll ban you for stating, to include the claim that vaccinated people can spread COVID. Twitter has quietly updated its COVID-19 misleading information policy to impose new sanctions on tweets about vaccines, PCR tests, and health authorities. These sanctions include removing and labeling tweets. Both types of sanctions also result in Twitter users accruing strikes on their account, which can lead to a permanent suspension. One of the most notable changes to this COVID-19 misleading information policy is related to claims about whether vaccinated people can spread the coronavirus. The policy now states that Twitter will label tweets with corrective information and give users a strike if they claim that vaccines will cause you to be sick, spread the virus, or could be more harmful than getting COVID-19, post what Twitter describes as false or misleading claims that people who have received the vaccine can spread or shed the virus or symptoms or immunity to unvaccinated people. This means Twitter users could now be sanctioned for sharing or discussing the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's admission that, quote, vaccinated people can still become infected and have the potential to spread the virus to others. Another change is that Twitter will start giving a strike to and labeling the tweets of users that use research and statistical findings to, quote, make claims contrary to health authorities, unquote, if it decides that their claims, quote, misrepresent research or statistical findings pertaining to the severity of the disease, prevalence of the virus, or effectiveness of widely accepted preventative measures, treatments, or vaccines, unquote. Previously, Twitter would sanction what it deemed to be false or misleading information about research findings, but there was no provision about contradicting health authorities. In addition to this, Twitter will give users 2 strikes and remove their tweets if they claim that vaccines approved by health agencies, such as Pfizer's Comirnaty vaccine in the United States, did not actually receive full approval/authorization, and therefore that the vaccines are untested, experimental, or somehow unsafe. This appears to be a reference to criticism of a footnote in the Federal Drug Administration's full authorization documents for the Pfizer-BioNTech Comirnaty vaccine, which revealed that the FDA had extended the emergency use authorization for the same vaccine. Furthermore, users that claim that vaccines are part of a global surveillance effort will have their tweets removed and be given 2 strikes. Some of the other claims that will be sanctioned under Twitter's updated policy include false or misleading information suggesting that unapproved treatments can be curative of COVID-19, label and 1 strike. Claims that vaccines in general are dangerous and the adverse effects that have been covered up by the government/the medical industry, removal and 2 strikes. Tweets that incite fear or misrepresent the ingredients or contents of COVID-19 vaccines, label and 1 strike. Tweets that mischaracterize the nature and science behind mRNA vaccines and how they work, label and 1 strike. And 1 other. So what is it that you can actually say on Twitter now about COVID-19? Get boosted, and then get boosted again. Jab, jab, jab. Oh, thank you, science. I think that's about it, really. I've resisted the call to leave Twitter because I don't want to, send my stuff out into an echo chamber. And I suppose because there's Gab and there's Parler and there's Getter, and which one would I choose? If you have any suggestions based on your own usage, I'd like to hear them in the chat. But I don't really know how I can continue to be on Twitter, because Twitter is looking for any excuse to get rid of people like me. Also, uh, let's not tell the truth anymore about real estate. And this is from a Christian Taubman at Redfin News. We recently decided not to add neighborhood crime data to redfin.com. We were considering this because we're very much focused on answering all the questions people have when they're considering a home purchase. And we know that one of these questions is whether they'll feel safe in a given home or neighborhood. But the data available don't allow us to speak accurately to that question. And given the long history of redlining and racist housing covenants in the United States, there's too great a risk of this inaccuracy reinforcing racial bias. We believe that Redfin and all real estate sites should not show neighborhood crime data. People are interested in safety, not crime. Well, actually, most people are interested in both. But it continues, one big thing we learned through our research is that there's a real variety in how people define and evaluate safety, and that it doesn't line up very well with purely crime-based data. When we survey people about what they want to know about a neighborhood, they define safety in a number of different ways. People variously say they care whether there's trash on the street, care solely about violent crime, or care whether they're going to frequently see people who are homeless. Reported crimes may not accurately reflect actual crimes. Yes, that's true, because a great deal of crime is never reported. But this continues. Even if you narrow down to crime as an indicator of safety, there are reasons to doubt the usefulness of the data available. The most straightforward source of crime data is the Uniform Crime Report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which collects reported crimes from police departments across the country. Most crimes in the U.S. go unreported, yeah. However, and most reported crimes go unsolved. Okay. The fact that most crimes are missing, what does that mean? The fact that most crimes are missing creates a real possibility that crimes that show up in the data set skew one way or another. And the fact that most reported crimes go unsolved means that some of the crimes being reported, in fact, may not be crimes. Oh, I see. So if a murder is committed and that crime is never solved, I guess the murder never happened. If you're extracting data at the neighborhood level, the risk of these gaps leading to inaccuracy becomes high. Crime surveys risk including racial bias. To get around the gaps with reported crimes, the other main data source we considered was the National Crime Victimization Survey from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. By virtue of being a survey, this has the advantage of being able to capture both officially reported and unreported crimes. However, also by virtue of being a survey, if there's racial bias in respondents' answers, this will get reflected directly in the data. And there are troubling signs of this. In the 2019 survey, people reporting crimes were more likely to describe their offender as young, male, and Black than would be expected given the representation of those groups in the population. Oh, okay. So since Blacks are 12.5% of the population of the United States, that means that they commit 12.5% of the crimes. And any crimes above 12.5% of the total are therefore not crimes. We'll weigh each and every decision to add data to the site. People are hungry for more information to answer their real estate questions, and Redfin is not going to give you that information. Actually, it doesn't say that. Redfin will continue to add more and more data to help with that. Just not data that's going to possibly offend people. Christian Taubman is Redfin's chief growth officer, whatever that means. He leads Redfin's product and marketing teams and is responsible for making sure that customers know and trust that Redfin will put them first and help them win in real estate by not telling the truth about the neighborhoods the houses they're selling are located in. Prior to joining Redfin, Christian spent 8 years at Amazon, where he held leadership roles in Amazon's retail, Prime, and Alexa businesses. As Noam Chomsky pointed out, if this law against hate speech, likely to expose weasel words, if this were actually applied, it would mean that stories like this could not be printed. This is from Chris Manahan again from Information Liberation. Minneapolis, Somali youths filmed themselves invading home, beating and tasing woman and her mother. From Alpha News, a video mob invades apartment in Minneapolis. Shocking footage uploaded to social media Sunday night appears to show about a dozen youths forcing their way into an apartment to attack a woman and her mother. Unconfirmed reports circulated on social media suggesting that the young woman who was the target of this invasion and attack earned the ire of the mob by accusing a man who is friends with the mob of sexually assaulting her. It appears that the woman who was attacked leveled this accusation on TikTok, where both her and the man she named have a notable presence in the Minneapolis era. The main video of the incident opens in an elevator as a group of Somali youths, some wearing face masks apparently to conceal their identity, approach their target. After a minor confrontation with a man walking in the apartment building's hallway, the majority of the group stands back as two individuals knock on the targeted individual's door. After the door is opened, the mob streams into the apartment. "How did you get into my house?" the targeted individual is heard asking before the beating commences. The mob can be seen raining blows on the young woman and her mother for about a minute. One victim tries to cover her head while she's attacked on a couch. The other is thrown to the floor. You can clearly hear the crackling of a stun gun going off before one of the female victims starts screaming hysterically. Her screams were met only with laughter. One could argue that publication of this story is likely to expose Somalis in Minneapolis and elsewhere to hatred and or contempt. Similarly, in my own province of British Columbia, there have been various gang wars over drugs going on in the Vancouver region for decades. I forget when I stopped paying attention to this. What was it, 20 years ago or so? The number of Sikhs who had killed each other in drug gang beefs was over 100. And there was a reporter at the Vancouver Sun named Kim Boland who was quite brave because that was her beat. And clearly, and she wrote many, many stories about this, clearly these stories would tend to expose Sikhs to hatred and or contempt. But no, the purpose of Section 13.1 and the purpose of whatever anti-hate legislation the Trudeau government is going to come up with is to terrorize Canadians into stop saying the truth. And, perhaps even stop noticing what is happening. Because, if a crime isn't solved, it's not really a crime. And we know that crimes are divided, based on proportion of the population. So to say that one particular group is particularly invested in a particular type of crime cannot be true by definition. And let's go to the chat. Hello to Ann Rundon from Beyond, Popcastle 88, Dan Allison, Chokokin 666, William Hicks. Chokokin 666 says you were living in a dark age of cults, heresies, inversions, and absurdities. History will judge this time harshly. No Sleep Till Breezewood, Pennsylvania says, how old is this verdict? It feels like the first Democracy Values post. It was 1990. B2 says, this has come up recently with Facebook's fact-checking is not what you think it means defense, hasn't it? Gamion, hello. These may be the end times, says Anron. Perhaps there will be no history to judge this time, only God. Palcasso 88 says Omicron propaganda on local news off the charts. It's all so tiresome. True Greenbird says, feels like the tide is turning. When we start winning, we must not stop fighting. We keep fighting until the tyrants have been removed from power. Only then can we rest and celebrate victory. Hello to Tricky Who. Gamion says, have you talked about the demonic plans to modernize Notre Dame in Paris? Indeed, I have. And I noticed that Eric Zemmour has stated that it should be rebuilt exactly as it was before and not become some sort of progressive playpen. Dawn from Beyond says, Central Florida, PSA, and Walgreens today. We now have Comirnaty available? Chogokin says, depends on if we are in a civilizational cycle a la Spengler et al. Or an eschatology a la a god. Contra says, the hysteria for universal vaccination is unsustainable. The fact that these vaccines, yeah, I better not say that. Only a matter of time before KMG leaves Twitter, says Emma Nimpton. And police are virtually useless, says Chogokin 666. I just want to know if the neighborhood high school has a bad basketball team, says Palcasso 88. Oscar Toe says Jack the Ripper never existed. Contra says a great tool for researching an area is the local public high school's equity score. It's hilarious just how well it inversely correlates with crime, safety, economic, and educational measures. It is forbidden to romanticize the eschaton, says a true Greenbird, or for that matter, to transcendentalize the Genesis. Anron says a lot of check cashing currency exchange places is usually a bad sign. How about nail salons? Does that correlate? Also, pawn shops, I understand, is a bad sign. Chogokin 666 says, you hear about that Swedish male rape victim being arrested in court for reacting to his assailant's taunts. No, I hadn't seen that part of the story. What else do we have? Lots of dollar stores and pawn shops too. Yes, says Palcasso 88. We buy gold, says William Hicks. Justin Proto says the internet is just a massive gaslighting mechanism. Metal Mike says our public health officials are saying that Omicron being mild is a myth. Yes, I'll get to that. Because Canadians are older than South Africans, says Metal Mike. A whole life not knowing the wonders of the permanent press setting on my washer, says Chogokin 666. Justin Proto says good percentage of murders are suicided to push down that way. I've mentioned this book before. I highly recommend it. It's called Ghetto Side. By Jill Levy, and it's about Los Angeles, the inner city of Los Angeles, where the clearance rate for murders is like 30% or perhaps even lower. And they have two sayings about murders in the inner city in Los Angeles. And the first one is, everybody know. And the second is, snitches get stitches. This book is really rather shocking, because it would appear that a majority, perhaps a vast majority of people living in the inner city Los Angeles are intimately tied to a murderer or murderers. Popcasso 88 says stars of Sex and the City reboot complaining about being judged on their looks, LOL. Speaking of gas lighting, the women on that show, I don't know. What's the one who left? The Canadian? I guess she was the best looking one. Sarah Jessica Parker. I mean, the gaslighting with this woman has been going on for decades. She is simply not good looking. She has never been good looking, despite a whole bunch of plastic surgery. But now she's 56 years old, and oh, wow, she's just so sexy. No, she isn't. No, she isn't. But I suppose you get in trouble for saying that. If there's a Family Dollar in the main drag in your town, that's not a good sign either, says Emma Nimpton. KMG, are you still planning on leaving YouTube, says Palcasso 88. Yeah. There may be some movement on that soon. Head McNeck says, years ago, before I knew any better, I was driving through East St. Louis with my new wife. I pulled over to ask for directions, and she said, don't. There's a shrimp and wings place on this corner. William Hicks says, makes me want to listen to L.A. Woman, Kim Cattrall. Yes. Kim Cattrall was a fine-looking woman 30 years ago, says Palcasso 88. Sex and the City. An old girlfriend of mine was addicted to this show. So I saw bits of it, and what I saw was just appalling. Absolutely appalling. I may have mentioned this before, but anyway, Mr. Big, played by Chris Knopf, who's been killed off by a Peloton in the latest series, or so I'm told, he is no longer with Sarah Jessica Parker, and he's with a model. And this model is an old-fashioned kind of model because she's beautiful. She's also kind and intelligent and thoughtful and all that. And of course, he decides to leave her for Sarah Jessica Parker because that's what, men do. Wasn't Kim Cattrall in Porky's? Wasn't that the most successful Canadian movie ever made? Let me just check. Bob Clark, who was murdered, by the way. Yes, Kim Cattrall is in it. Susan Clark is in it as well. A lovely woman, also Canadian. Okay, so let's talk about perhaps, was it Homer Simpson once said, if I just hide underneath all these coats, then the problem will go away. So let's talk about California schools. This is following after Oregon's example. Oregon has a bisexual governor. Pretty exciting, right? This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. California schools phase out D and F grades for high school students. As high school students transition out of distance learning imposed by pandemic restrictions, several California districts are dropping the use of D and F grades in an attempt to re-engage students in school and boost entry into the state's public colleges. Must suppress urge to kill. Los Angeles Unified, Oakland Unified, Sacramento City Unified, and San Diego Unified are among the districts phasing out D and F grades for high school students. If students fail a test or don't finish their homework, they will be given another chance to retake the test or receive an extension on submitting assignments. So I guess if you're too stupid and or lazy to get passing grades in the state of California, we want you for our state colleges and universities. Our hope is that students begin to see school as a place of learning, where they can take risks and learn from mistakes instead of a place of compliance. Boo! Stated Nydia Baez, assistant principal at Fremont High and Oakland Unified. Right now, we have a system where we give 1 million points for 1 million pieces of paper that students turn in without much attention to what they're actually learning. You could read the papers to find out what they're actually learning. According to Bay City News, if students do not pass the final exam or finish homework by the end of the semester, they would earn an incomplete. The news outlet reported that the aim is to encourage the learning of course material without compromising students' ability to enter the University of California and California State University should students receive a poor grade. The announcement of grading changes come after some public schools in California gave students the option of changing their letter-based grades to pass-fail grades. Sam Davis, board director of Oakland Unified, told ABC News that the D grade should be dropped, but students should still be given the appropriate grade if they fail. D grades are not valid for college eligibility at UC and Cal State, but obviously, if students don't master the material, they shouldn't be getting credit for the class. Then they would be getting an F, Davis told ABC. What is the purpose of college and university in the United States? For the most part, it seems to be a 4 to 6 year vacation, or no, there aren't enough jobs for you. So we're just going to encourage you to spend 4 to 6 years being radicalized and then coming out owing tens of thousands of dollars in debt. And then you can, apply for that job at Starbucks. So I looked up Nydia Baez, and to my surprise, she looks normal. She's a normal-looking woman. I thought, she might be hideous, but I see a picture of her from a news story from June 2013, and she is wearing a black T-shirt, which across the chest, in purple letters, it says, Wise Latina, after Justice Sotomayor, who I am confidently instructed was functionally illiterate when she entered college. There was an explanation of this in Wikipedia. I believe she was valedictorian, but functionally illiterate. Exactly the sort of person one wants in college, and certainly one wants on the Supreme Court. Yeah, it's too embarrassing, to do poorly in school. You know, just too embarrassing. So we're just going to remove the embarrassment. Yeah. Oh, she entered Princeton on a full scholarship. Yeah. Okay. Too funny. Let's see. Oh, this is again from Kane, a Citizen Free Press. Teacher of the Year arrested for child sex crimes, and there is a mugshot of this man, and he has what you might describe as a Dostoevsky beard. That's not really a good sign on this continent. A Fairview elementary school teacher was arrested Monday in Tennessee and charged with 9 counts of aggravated sexual battery, especially aggravated sexual exploitation of a child. And I don't want to continue because it gets too horrible. According to Williamson County Schools, Jonathan Ulrich, 55, was placed on unpaid leave after his arrest. The district sent a letter to families and staff notifying them of his arrest. And Principal Dr. Tracy Bullard will communicate directly with families about classroom activities for the remainder of the semester. Ulrich was named FES Elementary School Teacher of the Year at WCS's annual Employee of the Year celebration in 2020. However, he has a history of sexual harassment claims against him dating back to 2014. Okay. Yes, as I've said before, if there was any kind of serious investigation into the sexual abuse of students in America or and Canada's private and public schools, the results, I believe, would be shocking. Yves Lenoir, in the first volume of his autobiography, A Little Learning, he only wrote one volume. He spoke of his school days, and he said some of the masters liked children too little and some of them too much. And okay, so can we expect newspapers now, this trend of not telling the truth? Okay, I came across this by accident, and it was hilarious and shocking. This is from the Royal Oak Tribune. Longtime Detroit rock radio personality John O'Leary found dead. Oh, and I said, okay, so as it happens so often these days, he was an old man living alone, and he died, and then, oh, where's so and so? And then they bust down the door and find out he's dead. So then I saw another headline from CBS Detroit, Channel 62. Suspect arrested in connection with stabbing death of Detroit radio DJ John O'Leary. That's what you want to go with in the headline. Because, a man, unless he's famous, just dying, an old man dying, it's not really news. Someone being stabbed to death, yes, that is news. I'd be tempted, whoever edited the story at the Royal Oak Tribune, I would say, okay, don't do that again. You're getting one warning. If you screw up like this again, you are fired. You ever heard the phrase, if it bleeds, it leads? Yeah. No, that's not just a cliche. It's true, actually. Apparently, his roommate is the suspect who's been arrested in the stabbing. So, no, I gather in Germany now, they no longer print the surnames of people who've been arrested for crimes, perhaps even convicted of crimes, because, again, at the 12.5% rule, or whatever Germany's equivalent of the 12.5% rule. And this is a weird story. This is from the Washington Post. An Arkansas waitress served a party that tipped $4,400. It led to her getting fired. Ryan Brandt stood next to one of the more than 30 diners she just waited on as the man made an announcement. "We are tipping," Grant Wise hollered so the entire party could hear, "a total of $4,400. Cheers erupted from the table. Brandt, 35, buried her face in her hands and sobbed as Wise put his hands on her shoulders. "It was a beautiful moment and one I'll never forget," Wise wrote in an online post. The money was to be split between Brandt and the other servers who waited on Wise's party. But what was supposed to be a kind, life-boosting gesture after the December 2nd dinner has devolved into a nightmare for Brandt and a public relations firestorm for Oven and Tap, the Bentonville, Arkansas restaurant where she worked for 3.5 years. 12 days later, Brandt is no longer an employee there, and her former workplace has been forced to defend itself after firing her. All of it started with Wise's desire to dine with some of his clients at one of his favorite local restaurants while helping someone with a grand gesture. Wise, president and co-founder of a company that helps real estate agents effectively advertise on Facebook, had enjoyed his meals at Oven and Tap in no small part because of Brandt, who'd waited on him. He and his wife wanted to share their experience with some of his clients, so they chose the restaurant for a seating of the $100 dinner club, whose participants agreed to each tip $100 at establishments across town. Others who didn't eat at Oven and Tap that night added to the tip with donations. "We love the food and we love the atmosphere," Wise wrote online. "Our clients felt the exact same way after dinner was over." Wise said he called Oven and Tap before the meal to request Brandt as one of the night servers and to ensure his plan wouldn't run afoul of the restaurant's tipping policy. After getting the tip, however, Brandt said her manager told her that she and the other servers who worked the party couldn't keep all of it. Instead, they would have to split it among the bartenders, cooks, and food runners, something that had never happened before, Brandt said. Normally, 7% of a server's food and beverage sales at Oven and Tap are automatically deducted from their paychecks to pay those people, while tips are left untouched, her lawyer, Bill Horton, told the Washington Post. Still, Brandt turned over the tip, Horton said. Then she reached out to Wise to thank him for his generosity while explaining she hadn't gotten to keep the full tip. Dissatisfied with that, Wise went to the owners to ask that they return the money, saying he and his fellow diners intended to only tip the servers who'd waited on them. Horton said Wise then gave Brandt and the other servers the money directly. Brandt walked away with $2,200, according to the restaurant. When Wise requested his tip go to just the servers, the owners immediately honored that request as they have an absolute right to tip whoever they want, said Natalie Guidotti, president and CEO of a Little Rock-based public relations firm. Oven and Tap later paid other employees who worked the night of Wise's dinner a total of about $7,000 because we feel the entire staff worked so hard that night to serve a party of 32 people, Guidotti wrote. On December 7th, the owners told Brandt they were firing her because she told Wise how his party's tip was being distributed, Horton said. Guidotti confirmed to the Post that Brandt had been fired, but said the owners wouldn't comment publicly about why. On Friday, Oven and Tap's owners threatened to sue Brandt in a cease and desist letter in which they claimed she's permanently damaged the restaurant's reputation. People who've never been to the restaurant have since left countless unwarranted one-star reviews, an outpouring of negative reviews which will undoubtedly impact the restaurant's business, attorney Steve Brooks wrote in the letter. Oven and Tap has now been cast as a restaurant that treats its employees poorly. Golly, I can't imagine why. After Brandt was let go, Wise started a GoFundMe campaign to raise money so Brandt could pay rent and buy food while she was unemployed. Within days, the fundraiser exceeded its goal by raising more than $8,700. As the campaign was raising money, Brandt got some good news. Wise said she'd gotten a job as a server at another restaurant. Her first shift was last week. I'm reminded that one of the four sins crying to heaven for vengeance is oppression of the poor. Let's go to the chat. Let's see. Oscar Toe says Cottrell seems to have dated lots of interesting fellows, including Bernard-Henri Lévy. He is married to a woman now, an actress. She was one of the most beautiful actresses in France, in the world, actually. And just let me look this up. I know this woman has been in at least one Eric Romer movie. I see that La Vie is a pied noir. Yes, Ariel Dombasle, gorgeous, gorgeous woman. Oh, she's a vegetarian. Yes, she's in Percival Le Gallois, a great film by Romer, which I talked about on a theater Thursday. Catherine de Heilbronn, she is in that as well. And Le Beau Mariage, and Pauline à la plage, Pauline at the beach, which is one of my very favorite Romer films. Oscar Toe says, I just know we need to get Amanda Milius to have Kevin star in one of her films. Joken666 says, yeah, restaurant needs to be punished severely, scumbaggery in the first degree. Only Tom Wolfe book I read was A Man in Full, says David the Gnome. I like that movie a lot, a great deal. You know, I had thought with the advance, there's a description of jail in California, a state prison, and its depiction of the way the prisoners are treated, well, by other prisoners, and the rampant rape and beatings. And given that, as I say, this book had advance orders of 2 million copies, I thought that so many people would be shocked by the depiction of California State Prison that they would demand action. But that did not happen. Ariel breaks my confidence just looking at her. What an absolute beauty, says Oscar Toe. Let's see. The biggest problem with Bonfire is that it was miscast. Oh, yes, I read the book about it. Julie Salamon's book, The Devil's Candy. Oh, what a just disaster. Tom Hanks? No, William Hurt was the obvious choice. Melanie Griffith? No. And the judge. It was supposed to be Alan Arkin playing the judge. And because it's supposed to be a cranky old Jewish judge, and who actually does the right thing and is not going to be bullied. And so no, I don't know. Are people going to be upset if there's a Jewish actor playing a Jewish part? How about we cast Morgan Freeman instead? No one would be upset by that. Too funny. Hank's mistress could have been 19-year-old Uma Thurman, but they got 35-year-old Melanie Griffith, says Palcasso 88. Yes. No, it's just a 35-year-old Melanie Griffith is not going, this is a woman who is supposed to be, so sexy that, yeah, well, he ruined his life. And what kind of woman could lead a man like him to ruin his life? Oh, a woman like 19-year-old Uma Thurman. Yes. William Hicks says someone was playing the music a little too loud, drank all the beer in the fridge, or forgot to flush. I don't know. Princeton doesn't give full scholarship, but does give need-based financial aid, says Jim Smith. Oh, thank you for that. Let's see. Just saw that Susan Clark was in Webster. Yes. Do you know that when was this? Was this 30 years ago? There were 2 hit shows starring Black children with serious growth deficiencies. 2. How about that? Contra Coup says, we're honestly not far away from schools only testing whites and Asians while automatically passing the rest. Anything less could lead to embarrassing disparities. Chogokin 666 says Fresno Community College will accept a D+ average. Yeah. one of the reasons I liked Dan Harmon's show Community so much, people said that, it was kind of wacky. It's set in a community college a place where there are no consequences. So you could get away with it. Let's see, who else do we have here? I saw that a writer from Sex and the City regretted not having a family. I can't confirm this is true, though. Sex and the City, like Virginia Woolf, only makes sense if you realize it's about gays, says Palpcasso 88. Yes, exactly true. Just like all the plays of Tennessee Williams and all the plays of Edward Albee. Oh, a squabbling married couple. No, think about squabbling gay couple. Parker was in Square Peg, says Metal Mike. Yeah, that's where I first saw her. Hey, KMG, do you remember Verdun? That's the vibe all over Montreal, says Jeffrey Pye. I've only ever been to Montreal once. I think I spent a week there in 1975. So I can't say that I know it well. I stayed in Westmount. Actually, Westmount is one of the richest districts in Canada, but not all the people who live there are rich. I remember I was visiting a friend there, and I went to his house, his father's house, and this was in July, and it was absolutely unbearable. And I said to him, "Why don't you have an air conditioner?" And he said, "It's only 3 months a year." Yes, it's only 3 months a year of absolute hell, so that's tolerable. I like Uma, but I can see how she might not be everyone's taste, says David the Gnome. Oh dear. Joe666 says never found Uma Thurman all that attractive. She looked like a less female Nick Gilder. Wow, there's a real 70s reference, or late 70s, early 80s. I didn't like I Am Charlotte Simmons very much, Palpcasso 88 writes. That book was kind of a shock to me and a real disappointment. I know that Woolf had a heart attack after he started writing it. And you can see this sentimentality in the book, which is absent from his other works. I'm told that is one of the common side effects of having a heart attack. And also, what happened to the jokes? Okay. Let's get back to it here. And let's talk about Ontario. When it comes to COVID-19, Ontario is absolutely crushing it. This is from Carissa Wilson at CP24. Ontario reported 1,429 new coronavirus infections today, down from 1,536 on Monday, but up from 928 a week ago. Today marks the highest the rolling average has been since May 27th. Of the latest cases, 94 have an unknown vaccination status, 33 are partially vaccinated, 493 are unvaccinated, and 809 are fully vaccinated. This is getting so embarrassing for Dr. Kieran Moore, who's the chief latrine walla of Ontario, that you know that they're going to change the definition very, very soon. Very, very soon. To date, more than 85% of Ontarians 5 years and older have received one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, and 80% have received 2 doses and are considered fully vaccinated. Well, for now, they're considered fully vaccinated. And guess what? The province of Ontario is freaking out over the Omicron variant. And can we expect a pre-Christmas lockdown, or maybe an after-Christmas lockdown? We have a whole bunch of panic porn stories here. I think those decisions need to happen now. Experts call on Ontario to decide how it will deal with explosive Omicron growth. With the Omicron variant poised to become Ontario's dominant COVID-19 strain, experts want the province to explain how it plans to shift its pandemic response, and many people are infected much more quickly than in previous waves. We've obviously dealt with this for 2 years, but this is very different. Dr. Zain Chagla, an infectious diseases specialist at McMaster University, said, "We're going to see something I don't think we've seen before." Yeah, how about deaths? Are deaths, are they stacking dead people in Ontario like cordwood? Because if they're not, uh, what is the basis for this panic? It would seem to me that if people are getting COVID-19 and it's mild, and that means they have, natural immunity, then that's kind of a good thing, isn't it? There is a myth out there that is mild. Head of Ontario's science table says of Omicron. The head of Ontario's science advisory table is urging people to stop their wishful thinking when it comes to the Omicron coronavirus variant, adding that any suggestion that the COVID-19 variant causes milder illness is a myth. This is from Cody Wilson at CP24. "This is historical. This is unprecedented. This week, Omicron will become the dominant variant in the province. People cannot imagine the sheer scale of what we are talking about here. It is really challenging," said Dr. Peter Juni, head of the province's science advisory table. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and no, that's not the story that I was looking for a particular expression. Oh, this is from Chris Fox at CP24. "Ontario will now consider province-wide public health measures amid threat posed by Omicron." And this is from Chief Latrine Walla, Dr. Kieran Moore. And oh, yes. Do you know what Omicron is? It's becoming a game changer for us all. How I detest that expression. I have to keep telling myself what it's supposed to mean. Because, when I first heard it for the longest time, I thought, does that mean that we were playing football, but we're not playing football anymore? We're playing baseball or basketball? Game changers. Okay. Oh, but South Africans, they're not the same as Canadians. Physiology, totally different. That's what they were telling us about the vaccines. And, we saw the numbers coming in from Israel, from Ireland, from Wales, England, and Scotland. Oh, that's not going to happen in Canada. How did they get away with saying that? Why do those people who said that, why do they still have jobs? Paul Joseph Watson has a piece at Summit News. Data coming out of South Africa indicates that the Omicron outbreak of COVID-19 is already running out of steam, quote, and according to one expert, the world has nothing to fear. Cases in the province of Gauteng, which had surging infections from November, appear to be leveling off, while 7-day infections in Tshwane, one of the early epicenters, are now relatively flat, states a report written by the Telegraph's science editor. Case growth is steeper than last week, but still has slowed down versus November, said Louis Rassau of the COVID-19 Actuaries Response Group. Data also show that the percentage of people who will die from a COVID infection has dropped significantly since the arrival of Omicron. Don't tell Dr. Peter Juni that, or Dr. Kieran Moore. They might burst into tears. And the thing that isn't happening appears to be happening more and more. It's just coincidence. This is from the Sun, the London Sun. Manchester United star Victor Lindelof fitted with heart monitor and still undergoing tests after worrying health scare. Lindelof has been fitted with a heart monitor after suffering chest pains during a game against Norwich. The 27-year-old had to be replaced after he dropped down in discomfort and had his hand on his chest. It sounds a lot more than discomfort to me. And there's a picture of him with his lovely Swedish wife. And let's see, is there a particular word in this story, one that begins with V? No, there isn't. It's just inexplicable. Inexplicable. This is from Kane at Citizen Free Press. Vaccinated Brigham Young University starting center. I will miss the rest of season due to heart damage. Another elite young athlete sidelined with cardiovascular damage. If only there were something they all had in common. Yes, it's a tremendous mystery, but this is definitely something that's not happening, because it can't happen by definition. Again from Kane, fully vaccinated Brooklyn Nets are riddled with COVID. Brooklyn Nets COVID-19 protocols list grows to 5 as 4 more players get ruled out. The Cleveland Browns are also having problems with COVID. Jarvis Landry, Jedrick Wills, Wyatt Teller, Austin Hooper among 8 Browns players placed on COVID-19 list. All the players who tested positive Tuesday were vaccinated. Golly, what could it be? What could it be? This is again from Chris Menahan at Information Liberation. The UK media is running reports citing experts insisting that hardcore vaccine refuseniks, so we're living in the Soviet Union now, may need to be de-radicalized like terrorists, punished and subjected to vaccine mandates. This is just the latest in the string of progressively escalating terrorist threats. From ITV, hardcore vaccine refuseniks could need de-radicalizing like terrorists, according to an expert. Around 6 million eligible people in the UK have not received a single jab a year on from the first COVID vaccination being given in the UK. Professor Stefan Lewandowski, chair in cognitive psychology at the University of Bristol, was keen to stress that many of those are likely to be marginalized people who are very difficult to reach for anything and for whom access is likely to be the biggest issue rather than psychological or ideological factors. If these marginalized people are living in cities, I can't really see how access could be a problem. What, they don't know about COVID-19? Why are all these people wearing masks? Perhaps I should ask someone. Suddenly, everyone seems to be wearing a mask. What could it be? But for a small section of hardcore refuseniks, Lewandowski said, it may be difficult to reach them by conventional means because their beliefs are so ingrained. He told the PA news agency they'll refuse anything. I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to get vaccinated. I don't think climate change is happening. COVID is a hoax. And Hillary Clinton is actually a reptilian shapeshifter. You're getting to people who hold a cluster of very exotic beliefs. Now they're very difficult to reach. Measures that could be used to reach more moderate people who remain unvaccinated, Lewandowski said, include assigning vaccine appointments to people rather than asking them to book their own, or setting up pop-up clinics in places like supermarkets or shopping centers. Another measure would be introducing a vaccine mandate, which he said will disgruntle a few people but can be very effective. And there's a picture of Professor Lewandowski, who is wearing he's in a classroom, it would seem, wearing a short-sleeved shirt, which is not tucked in, and it is probably not tucked in because he's got an enormous gut. Professor Stanislavski cares deeply about your health, but clearly not his own. And let's get to another man who was furious. That would be Andrew Neil. And there's a picture of him, and his caption, does he look like he's acting responsibly to protect his own health? All the arguments these hacks make in favor of vaccine mandates could be made far more fittingly in favor of fat camp mandates. Beyond the massive costs of obesity when it comes to diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, most of the people dying from COVID are obese folks like Lewandowski and Neil. Mandatory fat camps and BMI passports for donut shops would undoubtedly save more lives than any vaccine mandate. One could say the same, or Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, definitely comes to mind because he's packing an extra, 100, 120, 140 pounds, something like that. And Here's a story from Australia, which is just the nicest place on earth to live in, unless you have a certain, condition, or you've been around someone with a certain condition. This is from ABC News. When Sean Ferguson was browsing the plants at a local nursery last Tuesday afternoon, he never thought it would land him in 2 weeks quarantine in a Medi hotel. That night, he received the text message that no one wants to receive. At around 11:30 that night, I got a text message from SA Health saying that I'd been to a potential exposure site for the Omicron strain. As per the instructions, Ferguson immediately got tested, but what followed from then was a whirlwind of uncertainty. An SA Health employee called him the next day and told him he could isolate at home with his husband, and that if he tested negative, he could be released out of isolation after 7 days, as he had been fully vaccinated. After 5 minutes, the employee came back and said, "I'm really sorry, I've given you some false information because it's the Omicron variant. They are not necessarily happy for you to be isolating at home with your husband, and they're going to consider putting you in a Medi hotel." Medi hotel. Yeah, that's a nice name for a prison, isn't it? Ooh, Medi hotel. Is that like a spa? I guess any hope that the two latest people appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States were going to be defenders of rights dashed now. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The Supreme Court turned down emergency requests by New York healthcare workers for a religious exemption from state requirements to vaccine against COVID-19. A federal appeals court in New York previously denied the workers' request. The court denied the request in brief written orders, as is typical for such emergency actions. The majority didn't explain its thinking. 3 conservative justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch, said they would have allowed the exemptions. I guess those are the only 3 that can be counted on. Oh, New York said Pope Francis and other Catholic leaders have approved of COVID vaccines. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has explained that receiving the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines is consistent with the Catholic faith because those vaccines did not use fetal cell lines for their design, development, or protection, and the connection between those vaccines and abortion is very remote, the state's brief said. And a strange story from the New York Times. This is something that everybody knows already, but the Times is presenting this as if it's shocking news, perhaps heralding a change in editorial policy there. As U.S. nears 800,000 virus deaths, 1 of every 100 older American has perished. Okay. As the coronavirus pandemic approaches the end of a second year, the United States stands on the cusp of surpassing 800,000 deaths from the virus, and no group has suffered more than older Americans. All along, older people have been known to be more vulnerable, but the scale of loss is only now coming into full view. 75% of people who have died of the virus in the United States, or about 600,000 of the nearly 800,000, have been 65 or older. 1 in 100 older Americans have died from the virus. For people younger than 65, that ratio is closer to 1 in 1,400. Now, I've complained that people apparently these days cannot comprehend any number, higher than 999. But so if I'm younger than 65, regardless of any pre-existing medical conditions, if I get COVID, 1 in 1,400, that doesn't seem to be that serious a risk, does it? Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps it justifies all the tyranny. Again, from Kane at Citizen Free Press, FDA is working with the USPS to stop shipments of ivermectin. Aaron Siri had tweeted, "The FDA is working with the post office to hold packages containing ivermectin. The FDA could better use its resources to, publicly release the docs submitted by Pfizer to license its mandated liability-free vaccine earlier than 75 years from now." Well, come on. We don't want to rush them. Got to give them plenty of time to get it right. This is from Melissa Repko at CNBC. Kroger to take away paid COVID benefits, add insurance surcharges for unvaccinated employees. And it's a company which has a lot of employees, 465,000 of them. And, oh, yes, some more medical news. I'm seeing all of these commercials on TV for a prescription drug called Stelara. And finally, I had to look it up because I just thought, none of these commercials tells me what the drug is for. I don't really understand the point of a commercial. Oh, yeah, Stelara is going to make your life so much happier. Is it? Really? How? Am I eligible for this wonder drug? Why don't you tell me what it's used to treat? Cabot Phillips tweets, nothing to see here, just the New York Times casually mentioning that Merck's new miracle COVID drug might actually mutate healthy human DNA by accident. How serious a problem is that? The Times asked. A team of researchers at the University of North Carolina studied the use of molnupiravir in isolated hamster cells over 32 days and found that the drug did induce mutations in DNA. Those mutations, quote, could contribute to the development of cancer or cause birth defects either in a developing fetus or through incorporation into sperm precursor cells, unquote, the authors of that study wrote. And, oh, here's some good news about COVID. Again, from Kane, Citizen Free Press. New York's ethics watchdog panel ordered disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo to return the $5.1 million in profits from his pandemic book deal to the state next month. The extraordinary resolution was approved Tuesday by the Joint Commission on Public Ethics in a 12-1 vote, coming a month after the ethics agency voted to revoke its prior approval, allowing Cuomo to earn outside income from his book American Crisis: Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic, while he was still governor and New York was still battling the deadly viral bug. Jay Cope rescinded its approval after concluding that Cuomo violated pledges not to use state resources or government staffers to prepare the book. And let's take a look at William Briggs's website. Let's see. Raw Egg Nationalist at Baby Gravy 9 includes a slice from a Vice story, or Motherboard, Tech by Vice. Anti-vaxxers are terrified the government will enforce a vaccine for coronavirus. Anti-vax groups on social media are claiming that the spread of the disease will lead to mandatory vaccinations and unlimited surveillance. And Raw Egg Nationalist commented, thank God this was only a conspiracy. Briggs comments, conspiracy theorist 27, woke 0. And I've been asked by a reader to give a simpler summary than the simple but still complex summary of Eusebius's explanation of original antigenic sin. Yeah. And so if you want something simpler, then I talked about Eusebius's essay on this, but Briggs is breaking it down for us. Our effeminate and matriarchal rulers cannot bear the thought of letting the virus take its own course and not doing something. Incidentally, there's a whole chapter on the do something fallacy, and everything you believe is wrong. So moving on, let's go to Eusebius, see whether there's anything new there. The pandemicists must be stopped. Just a few words on Omicron is a dress rehearsal for the new pandemic, a New York Times article by Emily Anthes, a science journalist with ties to the World Economic Forum. It's subtitled America's Response to the Variant highlights both how much progress we have made over the past 2 years and how much work remains. And it's every inch as awful as you'd imagine. In the piece, Anthes laments that the United States is woefully unprepared for the challenges ahead, starting with the most fundamental of tasks, detecting the virus. She quotes a microbiologist to complain that, quote, we had a delay of 1 to 2 months before we were even able to identify the presence of Omicron. And by that time, it had already circulated widely between multiple states and from coast to coast. She wastes many words on the necessity of testing, testing, testing. Here, apparently, America still needs vastly more capacity. She and her many scientist informants also want more gene sequencing to detect variants sooner. She's sure that all of this is absolutely necessary, although she doesn't know why. No realistic public health goal underpins this diagnostic mania, of course. People who test positive for corona are sent home to suffer in untreated silence by themselves. Endless testing, tracing, sequencing, panicking, and closing is, however, a goal in itself for people like Emily Gurley and all the other pandemicists. Anthes gleefully quotes from Eric Topol to Trevor Bedford to Ezekiel J. Emanuel. All of them want the corona circus to play on, and after it ends, they hope for a sequel sometime soon. Never before have they enjoyed such personal and professional prominence. Even if by some miracle all this winds down tomorrow, this whole odious internationally networked enterprise of virus astrology, from virologers to sequencers to testers to planners to nudgers to vaccinators, won't go away. They were a malign influence even before corona, of course. In 2009, when we suffered under a small fraction of the pandemicism that burdens us now, they succeeded in causing an international uproar over a mild strain of pandemic influenza. Now their ranks have been vastly expanded, and they are already hoping for the next opportunity to close our schools, lock us up at home, and stick us full of needles. The pandemicists are truly dangerous, and they will grind human civilization into the dust unless we find some way of putting all of them out of work. They aren't going to save anybody from the next pandemic. In the event it happens, they'll just take advantage of the opportunity to expand their ranks still further and make all of our lives worse. And should novel viruses prove slow to materialize in the post-corona era, they'll get up to other tricks like new and enhanced histrionics over every seasonal influenza outbreak, tricks like I don't want to repeat that. Tricks, yes, okay. Still other tricks I haven't considered. The pandemicists have to go. When I want to find out, when I want to calibrate what the level of hysteria is in my country, I go to Trustee Bruce Arthur's Twitter feed, and the level is pretty much off the charts. Some reporter from CBC said, believe me, I don't like reporting on this, and I wish it would all go away. And I responded to her, I don't believe you, because I don't. They're addicted to the hysteria. They're addicted to the panic, and I think they're addicted to the attention. Alex Berenson's book Pandemia is now available for $2.99 on Kindle, and he writes, a profound thank you to RFK Jr. for endorsing Pandemia, now number 9 on Kindle. I can't respond on Twitter, so I will here. RFK and I may not agree on everything, but I'm pretty sure we share the 3 core views. Dr. Anthony Fauci cares far more about his public image than the public health, and never, I'm not going to repeat that. And looking forward to being on his podcast next week. Kennedy had tweeted, if you can read only 2 books on the pandemic, this book by Alex Berenson should be your second one, which is quite gracious of him to endorse a rival book. Some news from England, from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. The UK's former vaccine task force chief has slammed the government for focusing resources on giving booster jabs to healthy young people over caring for a huge backlog of older people suffering from such serious diseases as cancer and diabetes. I thought it had been established that there is only one serious disease now. Cancer and diabetes, they're just wannabes. The British government has embarked on an ambitious campaign to deliver booster jabs to the entire adult population by the end of January to stave off the threat posed by Omicron, despite widespread evidence the variant only causes mild illness. This entails a huge devotion of National Health Service resources to deliver 1 million jabs a day. something that will inevitably mean seriously sick people will miss out on cancer screenings and other treatments. As we previously highlighted, people avoiding hospitals or being unable to obtain health care due to lockdown prevented as many as 740,000 urgent cancer care referrals in the UK. And yes, apparently we have not destroyed our economies enough. So let's get to it, shall we? This is from the US Sun. January blues. Pubs, shops, and restaurants could be forced to shut in January as Omicron rips through Britain, sparking staff shortages. This is from Harry Cole and Nick Gutteridge. In a bleak update to Cabinet, the Prime Minister and Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty warned the new variant is set to spark staff shortages. They told the meeting, which was held virtually for the first time in months, this is also tiresome. Due to the spread of the strain, things are looking very bad. The pair said even on the most conservative estimates, the virus is set to unleash a tidal wave. Yes, you could say a biological Fukushima of new cases and hospitalizations. And let's go to dailyskeptic.org, formerly Lockdown Skeptics. Health officials refute Deputy Prime Minister's incorrect Omicron data. UK health officials were forced to correct Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab following interviews on Tuesday, during which he gave the wrong number of hospitalized Omicron patients, providing wildly inaccurate figures. Yes, how about that? Nearly 2 years into this pandemic, the economy is still an afterthought, writes Kate Andrews in The Telegraph. Nicola Sturgeon announces new COVID advice for Scotland. The First Minister asked public to keep festive celebrations to a minimum, reports The Guardian. I wonder how many of these people saying, oh, no, you should just skip Christmas, or if you must celebrate Christmas Day, keep it, as small as possible. I wonder how many of these people are atheists or even God haters. Tougher Wales restrictions at Christmas not ruled out. Yeah, okay. The Toby Young said on talk radio, the really frightening thing is every time there's a new variant, however mild, the government will do exactly the same thing if we let them get away with it now. 69. There's 69 Conservative MPs, members of the Rebel Alliance, a contingent of House of Commons heroes who saw through the government's fear-mongering and voted against the introduction of vaccine passports. Although their efforts were in vain, their defiance shall not be forgotten. 126 MPs stood against the motion. And Vaccine Task Force ex-chief, the vaccines were not designed to end transmission. What? Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça? Former Vaccine Task Force Chief Clive Dix has said that the, quote, vaccines were not designed to end transmission, unquote. But we were told they were. In a key confession that demolishes the government's strategy behind vaccine passports and vaccine coercion, the former interim chair of the UK Vaccine Task Force writes in The Telegraph that the vaccines will not stop the spread of the virus in the short or medium term. Quote, the battle over COVID transmission was lost some time ago. I'm afraid that the vaccines will not stop the spread of the virus in the short or medium term, but that is not a disaster. Indeed, the vaccines were not designed to end transmission. It was evident to me at the time I helped with the procurement of doses as interim chair of the Vaccine Task Force that the intention was to stop people from getting severely ill or dying, unquote. That is not what we were told. The vaccines were sold as a prophylactic, not as a palliative. I guess they never said these things, right? They never said that life would go back to normal, once the vaccines were introduced. Perhaps the statements to this effect will be removed, from news stories on the web. The disturbing impact of face masks on victims of abuse. For people who have suffered traumatic events in the past, this is Dr. Gary Sidley, retired clinical psychologist. Masks can escalate painful emotions in a number of ways. Victims of previous physical and or sexual abuse that involved an assailant's hand over the mouths can be particularly sensitive to the somatic sensations associated with the wearing of a face covering, the tactile feel of them typically evoking flashbacks and the reliving of the assaults. If the violent perpetrator wore a mask, merely the sight of someone wearing one can trigger the same disturbing memories. The Omicron variant is much less serious than previous strains, according to a South African study. But remember, the physiology of people living in South Africa is wildly different from the physiology of people living anywhere else in the world. You just always remember that. Always remember that until we're told that's not true. First Omicron death shrouded in mystery due to government secrecy, expert claims. Okay. All right. Okay. And let's go back to the chat. It's good news about Governor Cuomo, wouldn't you say? Paul Casso 88 says, I'm going to watch the Warriors after the stream. Can you dig it? David the Gnome says, I prefer the Maori film, We Were Warriors. I'm not impressed by late to the party MPs. Not much, says Me Too. Has Amazon backed off their censoring concerning books as of late, says Oscar Toe. I don't know. Abigail Schreier reported that Amazon decided that they would sell her book, but they would not permit advertising for it. Is Amazon selling Pandemia, says Anron. Yes, they are. Kevin, are you sure Bruce Arthur's hysteria is genuine? I think that it is. I really think that it is. I mean, as described by Eutypius, the laptop class, they only associate with people who think exactly what they think. And so anyone who disagrees with them is a hysterical anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist, and quite possibly a neo-Nazi. I really think that they believe this. Because again, they've been living in a bubble for, I don't know, from the time that they started university. Okay. What else I'm looking at? Oh, he retweets Justin Ling. This is going to cause pandemonium. Significant new travel restrictions a week before Christmas will be an absolute nightmare. All to keep out a variant that is already here and set to become the dominant strain in Ontario in short order. I see that Justin Ling has been translated from Vice to Maclean's. Okay. Dr. Kieran Moore, according to Bruce Arthur, has nothing to sell beyond some overdue LTC measures and more boosters because this government won't reduce capacities in restaurants and bars and more until it's too late. Oh, Doug Ford and his cabinet are the problem, same as it ever was, but faster. Oh, you see, apparently Doug Ford is another one of those politicians who has a drawer in his desk which contains a magic wand. And all he has to do is pull out the magic wand and wave it, and then people won't die anymore. I'm reminded, with the news that New Zealand intends to ban cigarette smoking, of what the great British satirist Peter Simple described as the Church of Jesus Christ the non-smoker, certain radical adherents of which believe that those who have never smoked will never die. I think that there's some people, there used to be smoking and non-smoking, sections in restaurants and planes even. And I bet there's a whole bunch of people out there who, when they get sick in their 70s or whatever, if only it's that restaurant. I wasn't in the smoking section. I was in the non-smoking section, but they were too close. I really think they believe that. Bezos made so much money off this pandemic. It's the least he could do to allow Alex Berenson's book on his site, LOL, says Oscar Toe. Okay. Oh, we're still talking about that movie from New Zealand. Contra Coup says, yes, Pandemia is available on Amazon and Audible. Remember when the media were all making Cuomo the best governor in all the U.S. history for a while there? That's Oscar Toe. Yes, indeed. I remember. And quite possibly the worst. Quite possibly the worst. Forcing these people into old age homes or to get infected, to infect others, with the cost in deaths being how many? 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. Then lying about it, and then removing his order from the New York State government website. Contra Coup says Cuomo undoubtedly pissed off someone in the ruling elite. Nothing else can explain the sudden fall from grace to getting steamrolled by the system from all angles. He is being made an example of. It would seem so. And what's happened to his brother? And the latest, some producer from CNN has been arrested on pedophilia charges, and Cuomo is being dragged into this as well. I saw Kamala was outperforming DeSantis in polls somehow, says Oscar Toe. Really? I don't know why everyone hates Kamala so much. I find her just as hateable as any other female dem, says Divid the Gnome. Her gross insincerity. I mean, politicians generally work on this, and they work on other things. I mean, some people are naturally popular, are naturally friendly. Others aren't. And, there's professionals that can help you with this. Some politicians have annoying voices. Margaret Thatcher's voice was typically described in the earlier part of her career as shrill. So she took lessons to lower her voice, which was a very wise decision. Contra Coup says Biden's approval ratings are going to crater after student loan payments resume. No amount of election fortifying will be able to overcome the approval gap. I'm getting crommed up with Oliver Cromwell, says Chogokin 666. For me, the most insufferable New World Order COVID politician is the New Zealand woman. What you mean? Sad Muslim lady, Jacinda Ardern. Biden's approval rates will suddenly improve to the mid-60s pre-election, I'm guessing, says Oscar Toe. The Omicron variant sounds like a 70s made-for-TV sci-fi movie. What was that movie? It was an Arthur Hiller movie from 1970. I'm trying to remember the name. Not the Andersonville. No, it's something like that. Yeah, it's about a pandemic, I believe. Yes, coming in the future, pandemics, and they're not going to stop, and they're going to be worse. How do they know they're going to be worse? How do they know that? It's simply unreasonable to make that claim that it's going to get worse. What is like climate change? Is that's the same model? I wanted to talk about Pete Davidson because I came across, or I was directed to on Twitter to find out, why Pete Davidson was trending. And I'm at his Wikipedia page looking at his hideously ugly face. Seriously, this man looks diseased. But BuzzFeed, which is on top of all this sort of thing, Morgan Sloss, people are explaining their attraction to Pete Davidson, and I agree with quite a few of these myself. Because you write for BuzzFeed. It's no secret that Pete Davidson has dated tons of beautiful women, from Ariana Grande to Kate Beckinsale to Phoebe Dynevor and now Kim Kardashian. Anyone who believes that Pete Davidson is in any kind of sexual relationship with Kim Kardashian wants his head examined. We all know that Kim Kardashian, by law, can only date black men. That's for a start, okay? Even though he seems like a legit dude, And he's a talented comedian who's found tons, that word again, of success on SNL and beyond. There are still some folks who just don't know why people are so into the guy. Golly, I wonder why. The circles under his eyes and over his eyes, and the fact that his eyes are like slits, that he looks like he has an IQ of 80, that his body is seemingly entirely covered with tattoos. Well, Reddit user ubenchwarmer164 recently posed the question, people who are attracted to Pete Davidson, why? And there were so many great answers, ranging from funny to surprisingly sweet. Here are some of the top voted responses. He seems very genuine and he's confident in his vulnerability. I get the feeling he's very focused and attentive with his partners. He's a serial dater. You, Britt Lee 8, a serial dater. Okay, I think this may be my favorite. He's like your weed dealer whom you feel safe around for some reason, and when he starts cracking jokes, you realize you'd hook up with him. The youth of America. He has a cute smile and facial expressions. The way he holds himself is confident, but not cocky like some other male celebrities. He's laid back, but not pathetic laid back. It's his energy more than his actual appearance. He's very open and candid about his struggles with mental health. That's exactly what I want to hear from a romantic partner. Talking constantly about mental health. And people who are that genuine and honest, while also kind, are often considered to have attractive personalities. He has a good relationship with his mom. That's maybe the best reason here. He's not a supermodel or anything, but I don't find him bad looking at all. He has nice lips and a good smile. I like his tattoos. He reminds me of the funny misfit dudes I was into in high school. This is friend of Fred Jenny. This looks a lot like catfishing to me, that response. Ooh, because in high school, the funny misfit dudes were so very popular. Was that your experience? He gives off real second lead energy. If you watch many Korean dramas, and who doesn't, you'll notice there's usually a hot guy who's a total asshole. He's the guy the girl almost always ends up with. And there's usually a less attractive but gentle second lead guy who treats the girl kindly and you root for. He's self-aware and doesn't mind self-deprecating humor. He is also a softie. He's full of skinny boy, BDE, like he knows he doesn't have to prove he's a man. We already know. Okay, K-Abe2 confesses to being bisexual. I like all women and men who look like wet cigarettes. Okay, that's a compliment? He's successful, funny, and confident. People underestimate how these three things make someone stand out from the crowd a lot. There are so many people just milling about, unsure of themselves, and just copying what they think is acceptable. Like talking about suicide on social media, to give one example. And here's a GIF of him supposedly being funny, and it's too hideous to look at, so I'm going to scroll up. It gives the impression that if you met him, he would try to make a positive interaction and fun. But if you didn't like him, he would not care. It's the combo of caring about others while still having the confidence not to pander or take it as a blow to his ego if people don't like him personally. He seems like the kind of guy who isn't afraid to hold a woman's purse. Why would he want to hold a woman's purse? Oh, she's fumbling with something. Oh, I'll take that. I'll take that from you for like a maximum of 15 seconds. He's basically a golden retriever of men. He's like a dirty string bean with the mouth of a truck driver and an effed up sense of humor. Can't tell you why, but my ovaries are really into it. Do you really mean your ovaries? You really want to have a child with this freak? He's cracked the code. I have a thing for dark circles. And finally, someone made a great TikTok explaining this. For a busy woman, you know if you come home to Pete Davidson, he's not going to ask anything of you. You can relax with him. He's not going to judge you. It reminds me of that. Oh, that comment reminds me of that Billy Joel song, Just the Way You Are, which I always thought was terribly insulting. Message, you're not much, but you'll do.